Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion about Georgia's democracy challenges ahead of the local elections. These local elections are a little bit more special than usual. Normally, local elections do not get so much international attention, but this year, because of the Charles Michel brokered agreement between the parties and all the political crisis of the last year, it is going to be a very important weekend for Georgia's future, for democracy, and also for relations with the European Union, and for the EU role in the whole political crisis solution during the last year. Today's discussion will reflect on what are the expectations from the EU's perspective for Georgia's local elections and also for its outcomes. We will discuss the cooling down of EU-Georgia relations, how to avoid that, considering the challenging political environment. And today's panel consists from members from the European Parliament, international expert community, and we really hope to have productive and effective discussion. I would like to thank to the Open Society Georgia Foundation for the support with which we could organize today's event. It takes place in the framework of the project Georgia's Europeanization, Assessing Progress After 2020 of Georgia's Europeanization. And without further ado, because I know that everybody is here for the panel speakers, and I would like to give word to Nona Michelidze from the Open Society Georgia Foundation to say a few opening words.
Thank you, Renata, and greetings from here from Tbilisi. Indeed, we're at a very important crossroad here in the country, and the local elections, which is supposed to take place in 3 days' time, would largely influence the further development of Georgia. Actually, together with our colleagues, we have been discussing all these latest developments, and there are clear evidences that Georgia is rather derailing from its European path. And each and every step what we see, which are made by the Georgian dream, actually allies Georgia from the European Union. In the last couple of months, there were a lot of developments in the country, but particularly I have to highlight several of them. It was actually the several attacks on the pro-opposition media. There was very huge violations and beating up the media representatives in summer this year. And we also see that Georgian Dream does not really have political will to carry out reforms, particularly the reforms in the key field and in the key pillar of the democracy in the judiciary. That actually was the reason why the government and Georgian authorities decided not to take the 75,000 million euro, which actually they will not going to get because of not fulfilling those conditions, which was linked to the reform of judiciary. We also see that there are several very clear messages. First, it's abandoning the Charles Michel's agreement, which was already mentioned here, and which where we saw that EU invested a lot of efforts to bringing together those polarized political parties here. Second, it was refusing to take the financial support from the European Union as if it was kind of, coming from Brussels. And thirdly, we also see that there was very grave violations when it was linked to the taping the foreign diplomats, EU ambassador of US and ambassador of Israel here. We also witnessed that almost all state institutions, except the Ombudsman's office, I would say, are very much controlled by the billionaire Nona Michelidze and all the people who are around him, who actually are serving his private interests. And we also witnessed that Georgia is rather becoming the classical example of the captured state when, as I said, the state institutions are just, serving the interest of one person. So there comes a question now where the solution is, and the solution is, of course, lies in the hands of Georgians and in the hands of the Georgian society, which has to make, the very clever and very thoughtful decisions which way Georgia has to develop. Either we go back to where we are coming from, where we gain the independence back to the Russian orbit, or we have to pursue again farther to this to the Europeanization agenda. But at the same time, we really need the support coming from our Western partners, and this support should not be only just the statements, but expressing any kind of deep concerns, but it should be also targeting those people, the sanctions actually, which are involved in this, all perpetrators and who are actually involved in this wrongdoings. We also see that, and we also expect that and that's how we are looking at those local elections. That this is not just the local elections when we are electing the mayors and members of the city councils, but we are also very much deciding our future. Either on Saturday we are going back where we are coming from, as I already mentioned, or we are also pursuing the goal that a lot of people here really wanted to, and a lot of people perished for. That's Georgia's European integration. So the choice is very easy. At the same time, it's very difficult. But I hope that we would continue pursuing our Georgia's Europeanization agenda. I would stop here, and of course, we'll be happy to contribute further. Thank you.
Thank you, Vano, very much for this introduction. And I would like to invite everybody to participate actively in the discussion in the chat and also in the Q&A section. You can write anytime throughout the discussion, starting now. And now I would like to give word to today's moderator, Franziska Smolnik, who is a deputy head of research division at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, based in Berlin. Thank you, and Franziska, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. It is really my great pleasure and honor to chair this discussion on Georgian EU relations against the backdrop of the recent dynamics that we've seen domestically in Georgia. I will not take up much of our time with a lengthy introduction. We heard about the key questions that we are going to target in this event. So, and I assume that everybody is quite well aware of the developments. So jumping right into medias res, I would like to just very briefly introduce this distinguished panel, even though I don't think they need much introduction. So I would like to very warmly welcome Viola von Cramon, Petros Auštrevičius, and Nona Michelidze. Viola von Cramon is a member of the European Parliament from Germany. She represents the group of the Greens, the European Free Alliance, and she is also, among others, a member of the EP's Committee on Foreign Affairs, as well as its delegation to the Euronest and Parliamentary Assembly. Colleague of her is Petros Auštrevičius, a member of the European Parliament from Lithuania, and he represents the Renew Europe group. And as well, he is a member of the EP's Committee on Foreign Affairs and the Euronest delegation. He was last year's rapporteur on the European Parliament's recommendations on the Eastern Partnership. Last but certainly not least, I would like to welcome Dr. Nona Michelidze. She's a senior fellow at the IAI, the International Affairs Institute in Rome. Until 2020, she headed the Institute's Eastern Europe and Eurasia program. She has a long-standing expertise on the South Caucasus, the wider Black Sea region, but also the EU's Eastern neighborhood policy. So I'm very thrilled to have you on the panel. As has been said, we'd like to ask later on in the Q&A section to present your questions and comments in the Q&A function. I would kindly like to ask our panelists to be concise and limit your input to about 5 minutes, that we have some time to cover ground in the Q&A section. And without further ado, I suggest that we proceed in the order as given in the program. Mrs. von Cramon, the floor is yours.
Oh, I thought we start with Petra, since he starts with an A. Even if, as a lady, I would give him the floor first. But well, you decide. In my program, he's first. I think that Venno has mentioned this is a special elections. Even we call it only municipal or local elections. I think it happens very seldom that OSZE ODIHR sends a full-fledged mission with hopefully 350 short-term observers, 20 or 22, I think, long-term observers, core team. Preparation goes as for an ordinary legislative or presidential election. This is very uncommon. Even our colleagues, as you have mentioned, are in the air now, hopefully approaching Tbilisi very soon. So the European Parliament normally do not send observation mission for local elections. So that shows the importance, the significance of these elections. The political environment is extremely challenging, to put it mildly. A lot is on stake. We are following the situation very closely with greater and greater concern, to be honest. Every time I go to Georgia, I think this is now the peak of the tensions, and then you realize it's getting worse and worse instead of depolarizing. It's hard to say that both parties pull on one end, because you see there's always a reaction to something. So I think it is a little bit more grayish, but you see that the ruling party is obviously very much afraid of losing the power. The word state capturing was mentioned. The terminology is, of course, very broad, and I was always reluctant to use that in the case of Georgia, where we have seen it in Moldova, where we have seen it in Azerbaijan and in other countries in the Eastern Partnership region. But now I think there is no more doubts that we see a full state capturing also in Georgia, and that's extremely unfortunate. Why Georgia was always the role model for the region in terms of reforms when it comes to foreign direct investment, when it came to anti-corruption reforms and many other let's say indicators from which on you could see that at least Georgia is pulling in the right direction. For the last weeks and months, I have to say I always had hope that the decision makers in Tbilisi understood that they are responsible not only for their own power and for their own party and for their own people, but for the entire country. But less and less I have the feeling that is really true. And people, and this is my main message, are getting the impression that it doesn't really matter who they vote for. In the end, the result is already fabricated or clear. And we really should avoid that. And I was trying to convey the message, please go out and vote. Please really look carefully through the ballot paper. don't go just for one or the other party. Look what kind of candidates might be responsible, appropriate. Cast your vote, take your right to vote, and really make a difference, because it makes a difference if we mobilize in a proper way and we see new candidates. It is about the council, it is about mayors, and it can make a huge difference if people show up and vote in a much larger participation than we were afraid of. So this fatigue, what we have often given as a current picture from Georgia, is extremely unfortunate. And I really hope that with our presence on the ground, with the OSZE, with a lot of international attention, people understand it is in the end up to them. It is their election and it's their decision. And I can only appeal and hope that we have, let's say, a different situation on the 2nd of October. We are ready to support and to help. And I also hope we do not have to mediate in the long run, but we can really work with our partners in the Georgian government afterwards.
Thank you very much. And then I hand over the floor directly to Petras Auštrevičius.
Thank you, Franziska. Thank you for inviting me to this discussion. And I can tell you frankly, and from very start, I can subscribe to each and every word pronounced by my colleague Viola von Cramon. I mean, I think she did in a very good way. I mean, expressing the European Parliament position on present situation. And indeed, I mean, probably nobody has expected, and normally speaking, it's not a matter of urgency that the municipal election in any partner country would, attach such a, attention from our outside. And it happens so that we are in a midst of kind of political drama. I didn't expect myself, even knowing that we have April 19 agreement. These elections will be such a political drama, such an important, let's say, decision day for Georgia, but as well, it's for us. For Georgia, I think it's very important, I mean, to prove again that this course of Euro integration, Euro aspirations are based not just on political statements, but on something more tangible. What we expect from municipal elections, we expect, I would say, I mean, probably three major things: free elections, fair elections, and accepted results by political parties. This is very standard procedure for each and every elections held in member states as well in our partner countries. So that's why seeing extreme polarization, extreme diversity of views, and even physical withstanding against each other. Unfortunately, I can't describe the campaigning as calm, as equally competitive and informative. There are things which we do not like to see in campaigning, especially in a country with the association agreement as Georgia. It's very unfortunate. We have a gentleman agreement, which was brokered by Charles Michel and signed by parties on the 19th of April. But at the same time, I feel that there is a lack and absence of gentlemanship. And this is something, I regret. So if we have signed an agreement, we legitimately expected all sides to live up to that agreement, to implement that agreement. So we can notice that there was a departure from that agreement. Some parts are not implemented. And I have a major question. Will the following parts will be implemented as, for example, 43% to be given to the Georgia dream in order to continue this course and to have no early elections. So that's why, in spite of all interpretations, I think the municipal elections in Georgia now are kind of vote of confidence. And I only call for all parties to demonstrate, calm and democratic attitude towards their electorate. These elections are not for us. These elections are for Georgia, and it should be rightly understood from very start. So that's why we're looking forward for this kind of once again, exam of democracy in Georgia, which will again be a kind of proof for Georgia's resilience against any, attempts, to derail Euro integration and, to postpone or to bring kind of, non-performing countries status towards Georgia. So we expect that the remaining days of campaigning will be calm and according to high expectations from observers and from the institutions in charge, because Euro integration is a guarantee for democratization. But again, democratization is a major part of Europeization in Georgia. So that's why it's so interlinked. It's so important, to see both processes going at the same time and hopefully in the same direction. And finally, my point on this taping scandal which happened in Georgia. I can make a very short statement that the European Union diplomats, EU diplomats, and Western diplomats do not present any strategic threat to the state of Georgia. So wiretapping our diplomats, officials, it's a sign of, kind of non-confidence in us. So it should be rightly understood in Tbilisi by high officials of Georgia that is completely unacceptable. And it will be repeated every time, we have any meeting with the Georgian politicians. Doesn't matter what party they come. We will repeat it. This is a lesson which should be learned and not repeated. And I hope some conclusions to be drawn after this, situation. So that's why let's hope that the October 2nd will be a day when we will, again, have a proof for maturity of Georgian democracy. And again, one more step towards Europeization, Euro integration, which is so important for Georgia and for Georgian people. So these elections are not just, to satisfy some ambitions of political elite. It's about the future of Georgians. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these straightforward remarks. And I would hand over to Dr. Michelidze.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this seminar. Both speakers spoke already about the importance of upcoming elections in Georgia. I will not repeat what has already said. Let me only pick up what MP Austrevicius said. We did not expect such a political drama out of this election. We did not expect Georgian dream would broke the gentleman agreement. What we can call it's an unexpected consequences of the youth democracy promotion in Georgia. Because let's look at the things from the different angle. The EU aimed to develop its relations with Georgia, so supporting democracy and state building process with the final goal to sign association agreement, DCFTA, reach the visa-free travel for the Georgian citizens to the EU Schengen zone countries. These aims have been reached, but Georgia still is a failed country, still is a failed democracy. And Bano already was mentioning kind of main characteristics of the Georgian style of governance. Let me just summarize it. Informal governance, absence of effective check and balances, lack of respect for state institutions, elite corruption, selective justice, politicized prosecution office, no tolerance and demonization of the oppositional political groups, civil society organizations, and social activists, unlawful interference with business activities, illegal participation in interpersonal activities, illegal enrichment, violation of election campaigning financing rules, vote buying during the last election, so you name it. All these are the characteristics of the Georgian style of governance today. And the situation described exposed not only the challenges to the Georgia's future integration into the Euro-Atlantic structures, but it describes challenges also for the future of EU democracy promotion and EU democracy support in Georgia. And I would call it unexpected consequences of the EU. These are unexpected consequences of the EU's democracy support in Georgia. And I would mention only 4 points speaking about the failures of this policy. The failure maybe was to find the right balance between promotion of state resilience and society resilience in Georgia. The EU, by promoting democracy through sectoral reform at the top-down level and less in the bottom-up level, involuntarily ended up to reinforce an authoritarian resilience of the state, because in the countries like Georgia, state resilience doesn't necessarily mean society resilience. While the EU has progressively improved its instruments for supporting civil society, the majority of its policy tools remain oriented toward institutional structures and toward governing elite. Overall, the technocratic approach in the implementation of the DCFTA has overlooked the broader implications for EU democracy promotion in Georgia. And what I mean that the broader social trends were totally overlooked by this technocratic focus on trade liberalization, public sector reform, with the emphasis to engage only the elite actors and not really social sources. Second point, the cornerstone of the EU discourse was that it would build its partnership with Georgia and with neighboring countries based on the values. However, it rarely applied political conditionality in the way in which this was implied by the official discourse. So the EU over the years remained unwilling to criticize Georgian government. I'm in EU, I'm in official Brussels, I'm in EU delegations in Georgia, and I remember just 2 years ago, in 2019, when Donald Tusk visited Batumi International Conference, after meeting with Ionishvili, he said, and I'm quoting him, "After meeting with you, your opponents, the government and the president, I feel that Georgia has a very good and promising future. I think everything is wonderful in Georgia." And this was just 2 years ago. And Johannes Hahn, the same. I mean, he mentioned there were some challenges to Georgian democracy, but overall, Georgia was a front runner of the Eastern Partnership Program, especially in a rule of law sector. Now, third point, prioritization of the policy of stabilization over democratization. With a split feeling, impression is that Brussels has given a secondary role to value promotion in general, not only in Georgia, but EU foreign policy, while democratic rhetoric has been a cornerstone of EU policy toward the neighbors. Practice has shown a more pronounced interest of the EU in stability and security rather than in democracy. My first point, the failure of the EU bureaucracy to anticipate, prevent, and reverse undesired results of democracy support in the neighborhood. EU is reactive to the events that manifest themselves during the crisis, but lacks self-evaluation and self-corrections when they manifest themselves. So the policy practice therefore ends up with a situation where the outcomes of certain actions differ from the foreseen or planned objectives. And my last point, as a conclusion, I think that the EU should understand that continuation of the support to the Georgian government and governmental reform without applying tough financial and political conditionality It's not fair, not only towards the European taxpayers, it discredits also the EU in the eyes of the liberal-minded Georgian voters in Georgia and in the neighborhood. The risk is that the failures of the Georgian government will be associated not only to the government, but also to the EU and to the idea of democracy development in the country. Thank you.
Thank you for this very concise analysis of EU policy towards Georgia. And I think I would like to hand back right over to both representatives of the European Parliament to maybe comment also on possible shortcomings on the EU side in its relations to Georgia. Also, there have been some questions already in the Q&A section, which relate basically to after the elections, what concrete things are being discussed in Brussels as concerns EU-Georgia relations? So what concrete steps can we expect? Thank you.
May I go first? Sorry about this. And yeah, thanks. I mean, Nona is absolutely right with everything she has analyzed. No question about that. And I would also stress that many of us, not myself, but many others, woke up with the brutal attacks against the journalists during the Pride, but also afterwards. So what we see is repeatedly and constantly attack on independent media. And that is, of course, also of a very great concern from our side. There was also a question on a coalition government. Of course, this would be, let's call it, a more mature way of governing a country, not just to strive for a mono majority. And therefore, you have to maybe violate and manipulate the elections to get this majority, but rather to be more compromise and more, let's say, moderate, be able to go for a coalition treaty as we do right now in Germany, which is not easy, I can tell you, and it's not easy or will not be easy to convince your voters and your members in the end that we go for that, but this is actually normal in most of the democracies. And therefore, I would see also the future in Georgia on a more coalition-led government. Well, when it comes to the next steps, to be honest, I don't want to disclose what we have debated and what is on the table. You know that the US is much easier on tougher sanctions. They have a different way of implementing those kind of sanctions. This is difficult for us, but we have already like a timeline what to do if things go worse. Let me put it this way. And we try to synchronize this with the colleagues in the parliament as well, with the ESS and the council, hopefully also with the commission. That's sometimes a little bit more difficult, but nevertheless, we will watch very carefully. And that's why we have this observation team or observers team now on the ground. And when they come back and debrief us, we will be surely, hopefully on the side of, as you said, the progressive one, the liberal ones, the Democrats in your countries, and hopefully will support them and not the other side. So excuse me for being so short and brief. I need to go to Ukraine delegation meeting now, since I'm a first vice chair there and they're waiting for me, unfortunately. Thank you very much for having me, Franziska and Renata, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your time in such a busy schedule. And I think Petros Austrevicius has the same commitment. If you maybe have one more minute just to follow up on what Viola von Cramon just said. And I would like to add that because there was a question on how the EU could empower Georgian citizens. So if you think about next steps in this direction as well, what could this be? And another question referred to the OSCE audio assessment. We just heard that there will be a debrief of the elections, which will be taken into account, but maybe also concretely what role would the OSCE audio assessment play? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And, you know, the European Parliament's delegation, observation delegation or mission presence in Georgia, once again, it's a sign of our commitment. I mean, we could have many reasons not to come to Georgia. look, COVID situation is not good. I mean, our people are exposed to certain risks, but in spite of all, I mean, we are present. It shows our commitment, as well as our long-term contract with Georgian people. It's not about just Georgian leadership. Once again, it should be rightly understood that the Euro integration package of reforms, bringing Georgia closer to this general process of Europeization, to be a part of this, it's our commitment to the Georgian people. The governments might change, but people of Georgia, this is something more important. We are committed to work and to try change things for much better. So that's why, you know, I would be rather, you know, kind of cautious. I mean, to make any radical moves right now. We have to wait for the end of the elections. We have to see the results of the elections. We have an agreement which is in place. I have to repeat, we think that that agreement of April this year is in place. Some parts of that of the agreement are not implemented, but we still expect full implementation, because that agreement is something, it's a solid base of our relationship, and it should be not taken as a kind of you know, to be, you know, observed or implemented by choice. I think it must be a must. So that's why let's wait and see what is going to come after elections. And even 43% threshold, which is a part of this agreement, it's a part of the agreement. Let's see things as they are. So that's why we expect, I mean, all sides involved who have signed up this agreement to live accordingly, up to. And that's why we have a whole range of instruments, how to, you know, have an impact on our relationship. I hope that any changes after in elections will be only for positive, not for negative, because, you know, I don't think that Georgia has a choice, an alternative, turning away from Euro integration. It was rightly mentioned by somebody in the chat that Russian interests in South Caucasus are geostrategic. If we do not understand this, and if we still naively believe that some things happen over the sudden spontaneously, so we are doomed to failures. So let's not repeat any mistakes which were so many times made previously in the past, but let's look with open eyes to future and not to make any unnecessary moves in this regard. So that's why I remain very much committed to our partnership. I know it might be sometimes in certain periods of time more complicated, less result-oriented, but patience, commitment, and you know, engagement from all sides is important. So I think critical remarks from our side doesn't mean that we are turning our back. No, but we will speak an open and clear language. I mean, calling things as they are, rather than you know, presenting things only in a rosy color. So I don't think we have the privilege and kind of possibility, I mean, to use that rosy color anymore. So let's talk business and let's think about people.
Thank you so much. And you also touched upon a couple of other questions that have come up as regards the Charles Michel agreement, also Russia's role. I would like to ask Nona Michelidze, also from your sort of perspective and based on your analysis, what could the EU do better maybe? What could be concrete steps? Also maybe again, taking up the question of empowering citizens.
Well, actually, by listing the failures of the EU policy towards Georgia and its democracy support, there are already answers for this. I mean, if you look at the EU's policy now towards Belarus, there are some answers also for Georgia. Now, we are not there. I mean, Georgia is not yet Belarus. But we see, for example, the funding scam of the EU towards the Belarus. Practically, the EU designed 24 million assistance package only for civil society organizations in Belarus, and the main kind of sanctions list. So I would argue something very similar to this combination of sanctions with growing support to civil society organization and mass media. By the way, Belarus gets 6 million euros. I mean, the independent media in Belarus get 6 million euros from the EU. The second thing that I mentioned, this will also, of course, serve to strengthen the resilience of the society. And not of the Georgian government, because I think that independently of the elections, because I'm not sure that Georgian Dream will not win these elections. Maybe they will win these elections, and the problems will remain there. I mean, with or without Georgian Dream, actually, the problems to Georgian democracy are there, and I think there is a urgent need for the EU to redefine its democracy support policy to Georgia as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Ostrovicius, I wanted to ask you, because also the question came up about how you can sort of tackle the polarization also among political elites. And I think in the beginning of this year, there has been a discussion about starting a Jean Monnet dialogue, and then the European Parliament would be involved in this as well. Could you maybe elaborate a bit on this and which action could be taken in this regard?
Well, probably it should be understood from the very start and rightly. You know, the EU has very limited powers and possibilities to change, I mean, or to be engaged in a domestic politics and democratization in this regard. So we respect, you know, domestic, let's say, political setup, and we work with all parties, but we are not to intervene. We are not Moscow in this regard. We will not buy, you know, favors of some politicians, corrupting them, or I mean, making some favorites out of many. So this is not our way, and we will not go that way, even in Georgia, which we love and respect. But you know, where we should be probably more, you know, committed and having more effective policy. It's right. I mean, trying to change the political culture in Georgia, with which I am in most of the cases in disagreement. I don't think, I mean, the policy or major principle in Georgia's politics should be all or nothing. It's a bit primitive, I'm sorry to say. I mean, this kind of you know, hatred against each other. I mean, the accident on Friday, I believe, what happened in front of the EU delegation in Tbilisi is simply unacceptable. You know, again, opposition can't be blamed every time for all kind of events and so on and so forth. I mean, I take it as, you know, opposition might be blamed even for rain or bad weather in Georgia. So it's you know, it should have some limits, I mean, in this regard. So improve this climate, political climate. Here probably we have to be more involved. Jean Monnet dialogue, strengthening political parties with the, you know, more pro dialogue, for pro-cooperational, making them ready for joining coalitions, rightly mentioned by Viola. This is something where we should engage, but there are limits. I mean, we we are not, as I said, we are not Moscow. We are not going to run Georgia from Brussels. So responsibility is local. Cooperation is in our hands.
Yeah, thank you very much for this sort of outlook. There was one question which before I think we'll close, we have to unfortunately close this session somewhat early because of our speakers' other commitments, but I would like to ask one question directly related to the elections. There have been the questions regarding the procedure and also the trust in the elections. So because of what we see in the pre-election environment, how would you assess this for further domestic development? So trust in institutions, trust in elections. Nona, if you would like to comment on this.
Do you hear me? Yeah. I think that different to the other election cases, this society now really has a choice. It's not only UNM or it's not only Georgian Dream. There are a lot of parties, and let's do not invent some excuses that there were no choice. So I think the Georgian people have choice. So what they have to do is to go to the elections and to vote. So what I think that the EU somehow should also leave Georgian people by themselves, I mean, in the democracy learning process. So this election is a democracy learning process for the population. And it has a huge importance, not only for the future of the Georgia's Euro-Atlantic path, but for the future Georgia, for Georgia as a state.
Yes, please.
May I continue? I think Nona is completely right. And you know, I mean, and in politics, there is no possibility, I mean, to see only one fact, I mean, not being connected with others. So now we're facing such a dramatic situation in local elections. And at the same time, I mean, a month or two ago, I mean, there was a continuous discussion about the possible application, membership application of Georgia by 2024. So, I mean, if you connect dots and you see this kind of democracy exam, which is taken by Georgia, will be taken by Georgia on Sunday, you know, it's, you know, you have to understand a bit broader environment. So how can you be, you know, having such a polarization and next day, I mean, almost applying for EU membership and to be given a candidate status. So maturity is something, and indeed I agree. It's one step forward towards more mature democracy. It should be, you know, kind of become a good argument to learn and to draw some conclusions out of this. But probably we shouldn't close a page too soon after municipal elections and to look for next elections only. I mean, we have to see what should be improved and what doesn't work in Georgia's democratic procedures, even in those municipal elections. So, I mean, to be, you know, kind of comprehensively involved and continuously involved, and not to see one event or one statement after another. I mean, it's a process, and I'm looking forward to be, you know, engaged in this kind of cooperation with the Georgian partners. But rightly, I have to admit, they should be sent very clear messages and assessments from Brussels. And it was mentioned again, we should not, you know, be kind of over-optimistic about some assessments. We know Georgian hospitality, which is excellent, but same should be applied, I mean, to the working methods at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to have one more question, and I take this directly from the Q&A part, and it touches Okay, I see that one of our speakers has to leave. So if Mr. Ostrovicius, you have like 1 minute to spare.
Yes, I do.
It refers to also more concretely the EU policy asking how far is normative EU democratization policy actually sufficient to overcome the path dependencies in Georgia. So I would give this directly to you. Thank you.
Well, I think I have replied to this one as there are limits. I mean, limits and kind of restrictions for the EU to get involved into this kind of the domestic politics. I mean, democratization is something different, and we are heavily involved, supporting indeed, you know, not just civic society, but having so extensive contacts with almost all political forces in Georgia. Look, they are divided into the political family groups. We are meeting our representatives. I mean, we talk to them. We try to, you know, enrich them with our experience from those countries which, you know, 20 years ago went through the Euro integration. And we had many, many outstanding issues to be resolved, as well as to build a new political community in our country. So that's why, you know, probably these methods are very important, but, you know, we should not, as I said, I mean, keep silence when some democratic procedures are, you know, being lowered in partner countries. Here we should be less optimistic and more critical, probably positively critical, constructively critical, in order to improve, not just criticize politicians of some decisions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we managed to cover some ground. I understand that everybody has very busy schedules. So nonetheless, I thank you for taking your time to engage in this discussion today. Of course, this has not been the first session on EU-Georgia relations. It certainly won't be the last. So I look forward to continuing this conversation. And I would like to hand over now for a final comment to Cornelika Katja.
Thank you very much, Franziska, for a very interesting moderation. And I would like to give a special thanks also to our guests who actually contributed to this very lively discussion about you know, events related to Georgia. It's always important to see the Georgia's events also from outside, but most important is also what the Georgians actually, voters, they think about the country. In that sense, we have to wait probably a few days and we will see the what will come out from this election. And it was already mentioned, you know, normally local elections are not so important in this country, but because of this many other circumstances which was mentioned and highlighted here, I think this election is very important. And I think one more thing which is also important, and we should understand as a Georgians that of course we should always pin a hope that there will be some assistance and help from our Western partners, including European Union. But one should not really also forgot that responsibility lies to ourselves, because at the end of the day, all this problem which was created locally should have the local solution, and we should not really burden our partners with the with all kind of solution, because there is no magic solution. We saw this with Charles Michel agreement, that even parties agreed and signed it, it was not really implemented. So it means that I think that we need more institutionalization of the Georgian politics, and there should be some ways to push Georgian political parties towards more consensus-based politics, which is not a part of our culture, unfortunately. But that's the if we want to move towards European Union and towards the Euro-Atlantic space, I think that that's the only way you know, how this should work. And of course, there's some role for the international community here. But as I said, a lot of things must be changed from our side as the voters, as a political class, everybody, and media, everybody has some role here, and we should really try to promote this. Having said that, again, I would like to thank all of the participants of this event, and we will try to continue our discussion about the EU-Georgia relations within this project and beyond. And let's stay tuned, and I hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much again.